All right, so we're jumping back up to the echinoderms, phylum Echinodermata. So even though I'm going to be going quickly through the slides, I'm going to try to talk about each point, but you are expected to know the information that I don't skip over. Okay, so if I look Phylum Echinodermata, these are the starfish and their allies. So there are some animals that aren't starfish that belong to this, like the sea cucumber. So this is just an example of what the skeleton of a starfish looks like. Water will actually come in through the madrepore, which is on the top of the starfish. It'll go down through this canal. It'll go into the ring canal, go around, come out the radial canal, and then come out these little tube feet, which you see in this picture here. So they actually have something called a water vascular system. So water actually goes through their bodies and carries food in particles, just like our blood goes through our body and carries different nutrients for us. So these little tube feet are used for water circulation and for movement, and sea cucumbers also have tube feet as well. Usually they just have a couple of rows of them. So they're radially symmetrical, they use their tube feet for locomotion, and they have a water vascular system. The nematodes. So we're getting into the three different phyla. The nematodes, the annelids, and the platyhelminthes. All three of these are types of worms. They're just different shaped. So the nematodes are the roundworms. You can see down here, this is called an ascaris. This is a type of common parasitic worm that can be found in intestines of people and animals from infected foods. So if you ingest something that has the eggs of this animal, they grow very, very fast. And then I'll actually show you a video of them being extracted from an intestine. So they also have a cuticle like plants, which helps them from drying out, and it is also another non-living layer. They're bilaterally symmetrical. They have a complete digestive system, which means they have a mouth that their digestive tract is basically a big tube that goes from mouth to anus. They often exist as parasites, and they use undulatory motion, which is a thrashing from side to side. So they'll contract one side of their bodies and relax the other one, and then they'll do the opposite. They'll contract the other side and relax that side, and it just makes them thrash from one side to the other. They're not very good at going in a certain direction because of the way that they move. So the next group of worms are the Platyhelminthes, and instead of being round, these guys are more flat shaped. So these are also some parasitic worms, including a tapeworm, which you can get from infected pork. So there are also some non-parasitic flatworms like the planaria, which is common to study in biology because of its regeneration abilities. So if you cut it, they're very small. If you were to cut it, it would regenerate the other half. So you end up from having one planaria, you cut it in half, you'll end up having two planaria. And you can cut it various ways. They have a blind gut, which means they only have one opening to their body system, so their mouth and anus are basically the same thing. They're dorsoventrally flattened, which means their back and their belly are almost touching, so they're flat that way, and they're parasitic. So this is the earthworm. It's the one that you're going to be dissecting. Most of the stuff that you're going to be looking at is above the clitellum, which is that big band that goes around the earthworm. This is a leech over here. Leeches belong to the same group as the annelids because they are segmented. You can see the little bumps along their body. They also have these little things called chetae, which are little bristles, and they could have a few bristles or they could have many bristles. Oligo means few and poly means many, so it could be an oligochaete or a polychaete, and it uses those to basically anchor into something in order to push itself ahead. So you're going to see this in your dissection. This is the pharynx. These are the seminal receptacles, and these are the seminal vesicles. So one thing you may not know about earthworms is that they are hermaphroditic, which means that they have male and female reproductive organs. So this is where the semen is made, and this is where the semen is recepted from the other earthworm when it does reproduce sexually. So they have something called a crop and a gizzard, which is responsible for processing the food that they do ingest because they don't have teeth. And then you'll also notice that they don't have any spinal column because they are invertebrates. So we're able to do our dissection dorsally as opposed to ventrally, how we did our frog, because it did have a backbone. All right, so the annelids, all these little rings here are actually named after the word annula, which is Latin for little rings. They have a closed circulatory system opposed to the grasshopper, so they have blood vessels. So you're going to see one on the back and you're going to see one on the ventral surface. And so blood is carried through these dorsal blood vessels. So if you have blood vessels, you're considered to have a closed circulatory system, whereas the grasshopper has an open circulatory system, and basically it just has like a type of blood that just basically washes through the body and carries the nutrients that it needs. It doesn't have blood vessels. So they're hermaphroditic. They have a complete digestive tract, which means mouth and anus in a tube that goes all the way through. And they don't have any lungs. So what they have to do is they have to breathe through their skin. And that's why you see when the ground is very wet, earthworms tend to rise because they don't want to drown, because they do use their skin for breathing. All right, so they reproduce by basically they sense that their mate is close by, they roll over onto their sides, and they go belly to belly, and then this is the seminal vesicle where sperm is made. It travels down and then it goes into the receptacles of the other one. And then the other worm, it creates sperm and it goes down to the seminal receptacles of the other. And so basically they're just exchanging sperm. So because they are hermaphroditic, this makes them monoecious, which means that one of the individuals is of both sexes. And basically they use this clitellum, which is that band that you've seen before, that helps with the reproductive process. It secretes a type of mucus, which helps the sperm travel. All right, so we're going into evolutionary trends in invertebrates. So these are things that you see through evolution that all invertebrates have. So they have specialized cells, tissues, and organ systems. They have a body symmetry. They have cephalization, segmentation, embryological development, formation, and coelom formation. So I'm going to quickly go over what those 6 things are. All right, so you're going to get this diagram and you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So specialized cells, tissues, and organ systems just basically means that animals go from a cellular organization up to being segmented and having certain areas of their body that are responsible for certain functions. So basically, as an animal gets larger, more complex, they specialize in what their cells do. So the earliest animals, like sponges and protists, animal-like protists anyways, they basically were organized on a cellular level. They had a bunch of cells that do the exact same thing, or they have one cell that does all the work. Then basically what happens is those cells tend to get together and form tissues, and each tissue has a different function. So you see that in jellyfish especially, where they have certain parts of their body that are responsible for reproduction and certain parts that are responsible for eating, basically. Then what happens is the tissues get together and make an organ like a heart or sensory organs and things like that. So all of these things like mollusks, flatworms, echinoderms, and nematodes, they basically have an organ level of organization, and they have certain organs that carry out certain duties. And then when those organ systems are located in certain parts of a body, that's called segmentation. So certain parts of your earthworm are responsible for reproduction, and for your arthropods, like crabs, certain parts of their body are responsible for eating, while other ones are responsible for walking. And you see that in your chordates, or your animals with vertebrae as well. Body symmetry we've already gone over. So the earliest animals had no symmetry, then you have the radially symmetrical animals, and then you have the bilaterally symmetrical animals. Cephalization means that you develop a central nervous system, which means that you have a area of a concentration of nervous tissue. So like these animals here, they don't have a head region where all their nervous tissue is congregated, but these animals do. So they do have a head. Like for example, this worm right here, and this leech, and this insect, they all have a head where a lot of their sensory organs are. So like eyes and a brain and a nerve cord, those are all responsible for sensing different stimuli. They're all located in the head region, and that's typically what happens as animals evolve. Segmentation just means that certain parts of the body are responsible for certain functions. Embryological development just basically means that when an embryo is developing and you go from 1 cell to 2 and then 2 to 4 and 4 to 8 and 8 to 16 and so on, you get this little ball, this hollow ball of cells, and when that ball folds in on itself, it looks kind of like this. And when the ball folds in on itself, it creates this little hole here called a blastopore. If that blastopore becomes the mouth of the organism, then you are a protostome. If that little hole there becomes the anus and then your mouth develops second, then you're a deuterostome. So protostome means mouth first and deuterostome means second mouth. So depending on what develops first for your digestive tract, whether it's your mouth or your anus first, you're either a protostome or deuterostome. We are deuterostomes, so these are the higher order animals, and these are the more primitive animals, they're protostomes. So you can see the different colors of cells here, and the reason why these are like that is because these represent the 3 germ layers. So germ just basically means like layers of skin. So we've color coded them so that the red cells here represent mesoderm, The yellow cells here represent endoderm, and the blue cells represent ectoderm. So any of the cells that are yellow, they end up becoming digestive tract or respiratory system. Any of the cells that are red end up becoming muscles, circulatory system, reproductive system, or excretory system. And any of the cells that are blue end up becoming ectoderm, which are your sense organs, your nerves, and your skin. So if I asked you, which germ layer becomes are your eyes made out of? Well, your eyes are sense organs, so they're made from ectoderm. And if I asked you like what type of tissue makes, or which germ layer makes your heart, well, your heart's part of your circulatory system, so it's made from the mesoderm. Now, the reason why they know what cells do what is because they do something called tracking cell fate, and so they're able to actually dye cells or flag them somehow and watch where the cells end up going in the later formation of an organism, and so they're able to tell what they actually end up becoming. All right, so the last one is coelom formation, and coelom just basically means a body cavity. So some animals have their body cavities organized in a different way than others. So there are three types of body organization. There's the acoelomates, the coelomates, and the pseudocoelomates. So the three types of worms that we had discussed earlier, they're actually really interesting because each of the different phyla of worm has a different type of body cavity, so people tend to study them to study body cavities. So Phylum Platyhelminthes, these are the flatworms, and if you were to make a cross-section of one, this is what you'd see. There is no body cavity at all, so that's what acoelomate means. It means without a coelom. So they have no body cavity. They just basically have the mesoderm out here, and they have their ectoderm, which makes the skin, and then they have the endoderm, which is their digestive tract. There's no cavity. Then the nematodes, these are pseudocoelomates, which means fake coelom. So if you look at a coelomate, like your earthworm, this is what your earthworm looks like. He has mesoderm covering his digestive tract, so this is where his food is coming through. If you give him a cross-section, this is where his food goes through. He has mesoderm surrounding his digestive tract, and then this would be the empty space that you're going to see when you cut into it. So it's like you guys would have empty space in you if you were cut open as well. So we are coelomates, like the annelids. So this means true coelom. Now, if that layer of mesoderm isn't there around the digestive tract, you're considered to be a pseudocoelomate, fake coelomate. Okay, so these guys have that red tissue, the mesoderm, and these guys don't. And these guys don't have any body cavity at all. All right, so knowing all that stuff is going to help you out a bit with being able to do your dissection tomorrow. So it's good if you had a chance to watch this video and take the notes. Even if I went over it quickly, you are expected to know all that information, and then we'll have a quiz on it tomorrow in the lab.